major winter storm that's been drawing a lot of attention is now imminent, and this video is right here for you with the final breakdown on impacts from wind to rain to severe weather and even snow. Stick around for that, plus a quick look ahead towards the end of the video. Alright, here you are looking at the final updated custom overview for the winter storm set to move out of the west as we come out of our March 3rd, which is when I'm recording this video, and then as we go into our Tuesday, March 4th through our Thursday, March 6th by the time it gets to the east coast. You can see there that once we get our snow moving out of the west, we are anticipating that snow in areas that I've been highlighting for days now: Nebraska, South Dakota, Minnesota, Iowa, up into Wisconsin and the upper peninsula of Michigan, having the best chance for at least moderate snow. Some areas of snow could be heavy, and that snow line will eventually transition down to the southeast behind this storm as it wraps up Wednesday night into Thursday in those zones, along with gusty winds that could induce blizzard conditions. Back down further to the south, we're continuing to watch that elevated threat for severe storms that begins tonight, overnight Monday night into Tuesday over the southern and central plains, eventually shifting over to the Mississippi Valley, where from there and over into the Ohio Valley and the East Coast, at least some isolated severe weather could continue to be possible, along with just generally gusty winds, heavy rain, and then eventually all of this will push off the East Coast by the time we get out of our March 5th and into our March 6th, just leaving some wind behind continuing into many areas. With that overview in mind, I want to go ahead into forecasting some of the specific aspects of the storm ahead, starting with severe weather, and then we'll talk about winter weather and blizzard conditions here in just a few minutes, and then we'll also talk about some of the additional overall impacts, such as wind, a little bit later on. Use the timestamps below to navigate the video, but let's start with tonight. As we go out of our March 3rd when I'm recording this, as well as overnight into our March 4th, a round of storms will drive the risk for damaging winds, some hail, and possibly a few tornadoes to kick us off with this event over parts of the southern and central plains. The highest risk continues to look like it's going to center itself out of Kansas into Oklahoma and parts of northern and northeastern Texas, so make sure you have a way to receive alerts, because again, some twisters will be possible hazards as we get into the late night hours of tonight and into Tuesday morning. From there, you can see we continue to watch our severe weather risk expand and move into points east into the Mississippi River Valley and the mid-south as we go through the day March 4th on our Tuesday, as well as into our Tuesday night into the early part of our March 5th, with more storms and isolated supercells expected in this region as we go throughout the day. While damaging winds and spots of hail look most likely in the broad sense, especially in those yellow and orange shaded areas. Not to say these couldn't happen elsewhere, but that's going to be where we're going to have the best chance for tornadoes in isolated to maybe even scattered fashion, and one or two of those tornadoes could be on that stronger side if the forecast holds for places like especially Arkansas, Louisiana, and Mississippi. That isn't even the last day of severe weather, though. Confidence has increased enough for me to make my severe scale graphic for the weather that's going to move closer to the East Coast and be in severe fashion continuing as we get into our Wednesday, March 5th. A lot of this will occur during daylight hours or into the very early evening time frame, with that additional round possible here as you get into the East Coast states, as well as some parts of the Ohio Valley and Appalachians. The main threat will be from that continuing line of storms from the days prior, but we will have that potential not only in that line for damaging winds and isolated tornadoes, but possibly with a more conditional second round that could happen later in the day into the Carolinas, Virginia, or mid-Atlantic. That's why I have the level 3 of 7 there, because we could have multiple rounds through the day. But anywhere from Florida up to New York, be prepared for gusty winds, at least with some possible severe storms then. Now that you know the overall severe weather risk zones, let's go ahead and time out some of those storms and the general rain side of this storm as we go through the next few days using this NAM model. Is it going to be perfect in its forecast? No, but it gives you a general idea of what's going to be happening as we go through time. And let's start overnight tonight and into the early part of our Tuesday morning, where we're going to be watching those storms erupting in that forecasted area from Wichita, Kansas, back down to Stillwater and Oklahoma City. Be on the lookout overnight tonight, right around midnight and points after. Storms moving in from the west, they will come in quickly with all of those severe weather hazards, from damaging winds to hail to tornadoes. Eventually we will see some of those hazards extending back down into North Texas as well as we go through the overnight, with bigger lines of storms possible getting closer to Wichita Falls and that Red River Valley. Look at what's going to be going on with this system by the time we go into the morning hours of our Tuesday. A big expanse of rain going on, even if we're not watching severe weather, all the way up in the circled area to places like Iowa, northern Missouri, into Chicago, Illinois, and throughout that state up into parts of southern Wisconsin. Going to be watching rain expanding in throughout the day, and the further north you go in this zone, where everything going on to the south is going to be forcing moisture up to the north, we could even see a more elevated flood threat out of all of this activity that continues. Let's see what happens here on this depicted guidance as we go through the day on our Tuesday. And you can see by the time we get towards mid-morning, the NAM model starts bringing the line of storms and whatever activity may be occurring out ahead of it, out of Oklahoma and Texas, bringing some downpours into parts of southern Missouri where we could at least see some isolated severe weather out of this. Better chance for severe weather out of the morning into the afternoon down there, as this line of storms looks particularly intense. And again, we'll have to monitor for any activity out ahead of it some point into the late morning, early afternoon in places like Little Rock, Arkansas, back down to Monroe, Louisiana, eventually pushing towards Mississippi and Tennessee. Again, rain will be going strong all the way up here into the Midwest around this time, Des Moines, Iowa, back down to Jefferson City in Missouri, St. Louis, over to Springfield, Illinois, rounds of rain through the day, elevating that flood threat. These severe storms continue to look like they will continue over to the east, and this NAM model has a pretty feisty line, possibly hitting Memphis some point late in the day Tuesday, all the way back down to Jackson, Mississippi. Be on the lookout for that late-day severe threat. Eventually, this will turn nocturnal, so any of these storms that we see on over here from Kentucky through Tennessee, heading out of Mississippi and into Alabama, it looks like we will be in that sundown time frame or thereafter when these move through, and they could definitely continue to be packing a punch with damaging winds, hail, isolated tornadoes. The threat does look like it will wind down as this turns into more of a mess of rain as we get into parts of eastern Tennessee, eastern Alabama, into Georgia, Florida, and eventually the Carolinas overnight. But still, we'll have at least that level 2 of 7 in a lot of these zones on my ONW severe scale for isolated severe weather risks. From here is where the confidence decreases a little bit once these storms get past Georgia and the Carolinas during the morning commute of our Wednesday and then into points eastbound. It looks like some of these storms could become stronger again as they get closer to the East Coast. So here in Virginia, the Carolinas, that's why I have the level 3 of 7 in these zones, even on up to parts of Pennsylvania, Maryland, into parts of New Jersey by this point in time, watching rain that started in the Ohio Valley moving over. And then you're going to notice we could see some additional storms into the afternoon with some of the daytime heating coming off the eastern slopes of the Appalachians and then into points eastbound from there. These are going to be some of those ones that could produce more damaging winds and isolated tornadoes into the mid-Atlantic as the day goes on. So a lot to watch, but the severe weather threat will begin to wane beyond this point once we see the sun go down Wednesday evening. While severe weather and rainfall are on the mind, let's go ahead and jump on over here, giving you a quick look at the Weather Prediction Center and what it is forecasting in terms of total rainfall and total precipitation out of the system. Obviously, some of this will fall as snow in some zones, but overall, a lot of the blue areas from the plains into points eastbound only jumping over a few spots in the Ohio Valley, indicating most spots are going to get at least a half an inch of rain, especially as we get around and into points east from the Mississippi River. Could we see some isolated flooding in some of these zones where you see those yellows popping up? Yes, we could see upwards of an inch or two in some of those zones. Best chance for flooding out of this event, though, is going to be where we see that rain that I was talking about that's going to train out of Missouri into Iowa, into Illinois through the day Tuesday, where we could get closer to 2 to 3 inches of rain in some spots, maybe even a little bit higher, and we could definitely at least see isolated to scattered bouts of flooding being more likely there. Now that we've talked about and broken down the severe weather side of this storm, I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about some of the snowfall. We'll break down some of the winds that could be driving the snowfall and creating blizzard conditions in a lot of the areas that see the flakes. We'll talk about that in just a minute, but let's start here with the future radar timing of snow, as we're likely going to see a thin band of snow beginning as early as overnight tonight, out of our Monday night into our Tuesday morning. Some parts of places like North Platte there in Nebraska, on up to Pierre, South Dakota, Aberdeen, over to Fergus Falls in Minnesota, looking at a brief band of snow that will eventually start expanding as it moves east through the day. And this could be moderate to heavy at times, and again, driven by wind that could lead to near whiteout conditions. If you find yourself in any of these blues on screen at any point in time, that is snow that could create blinding driving conditions that you want to avoid. Even on up there into north central Minnesota, it could be breezy with the snow into our Tuesday afternoon. Once we get beyond Tuesday afternoon, and then once the sun starts to go down into the evening, that's when the storm becomes a lot more dynamic, and that's when we're probably going to start to see our real accumulations that are going to be heavier out of this event cranking out into eastern Nebraska, eastern parts of South Dakota, through a lot of southeastern and central parts of Minnesota, eventually crashing on over here into parts of Wisconsin and the upper peninsula of Michigan. Looks like where we're going to have a pretty consistent event of moderate to heavy snow banding setting up. It's not going to be for everyone with those highest totals, but some spots will get over a half foot out of the snow. That will eventually knock on the door of Minneapolis once the sun goes down, and thereafter as we go through our Tuesday night. Look at how snow could even wrap around where we see rain and possibly even some stronger thunderstorms through the afternoon in Missouri with a second round there late on our Tuesday. Eventually we see Kansas City, Missouri crashing over to snow, and eventually over to St. Louis we will into the early hours of our Wednesday. And look at all the snow that will be continuing. Again, this is that heaviest band that's going to lead to the heaviest accumulations. parts of Iowa, parts of Minnesota, up into Wisconsin, looking at the snow continuing to come on down in droves as we see the sun starting to approach coming up into our Wednesday. Eventually, as we go through the day Wednesday, a lot of the snow is going to lessen up by the time it gets towards eastern Wisconsin, parts of the upper peninsula of Michigan, seeing the snow winding down a little bit more as well. But some of these snow showers wrapping around into parts of the Ohio Valley, into places like Illinois, Indiana, they could be no joke with some gusty winds accompanying them. By the time we get overnight, as we head out of Wednesday night and into our Thursday, that's when things will calm down. For many spots, the winds will die down too, but still from the Great Lakes down to the southern Appalachians, watching some snowfall wrapping around this system. Here's a look at the general snow totals you can expect out of the system using some blended guidance. I do think the banding will be weird, and some spots could pick up a lot more than others that are just a couple miles, it seems like, down the road as we get into the Midwest and parts of the plains, but that's how the system is going to be. After dropping a pretty consistent at least few inches through a lot of the high elevations out west, here's what we're going to see by the time we get through our Thursday morning into points eastbound. Look at what we're going to note on up here into parts of far northwestern Kansas, through a lot of central and western Nebraska, down into parts of South Dakota. Those blues indicating at least 2 inches, some spots getting closer to 4 or 5 inches with locally higher amounts of snow. Then we see that heavier band setting up into these zones that I'm circling by the time we get into the end of the day, Tuesday heading into our Wednesday, where all of the spots in blue from Lincoln, Nebraska, and far northeastern Kansas, through parts of Missouri, Iowa, Minnesota, up into Wisconsin and the upper peninsula of Michigan, expecting at least a couple inches of snow. Some spots could overachieve as you get especially closer to the deep blues and purples, where upwards of 4 to 6, maybe even closer to 6 to 8 will be possible on that high end. Yeah, we could see localized spots getting a dusting to a couple of inches as you get on over here out of the Midwest into the Great Lakes and Ohio Valley, but this is not by any means going to be a significant event in terms of accumulation anyways here. But the wind will blow everything around, and now let's spend the last little part of this winter storm discussion talking about some of those winds that everybody will feel. Alright, we're looking at the latest European Ensemble blended guidance on screen, and we're going to go ahead and push things out of our Monday evening when I'm recording this through our Tuesday morning, and then by the time we get into our Tuesday afternoon, here's your first little part of wind that I want to discuss, as we're going to see low pressure sitting around with winds a little bit lower here into parts of eastern Nebraska for the time being. We're going to see strong south winds around and ahead of our line of storms here into the mid-south, with at least 40-mile-per-hour gusts expected over a broad region. National Weather Service has pulled the trigger on wind advisories over a lot of this region, and we've got a lot of high wind warnings on the backside of this storm. It's coming back down through the high plains, the western parts of states like Nebraska, all the way down to Texas, eastern Colorado too. 50, 60, 70, even some cases 75-mile-per-hour wind gusts. It's going to be on the border of hurricane force in some of these spots. This is strong wind, nothing you want to play around with. Of course, it will cause power outages and down trees. Those threats are likely to continue eastward in any areas where you see at least especially those brighter greens turning to those yellows and oranges as we get through the rest of the day, Tuesday into Wednesday and Thursday, as those winds are enough to cause tree branches to snap and come down, especially with precipitation also falling simultaneously. And keep in mind, these winds right here, a lot of these will come around and ahead of your line of storms, so they might not be quite as damaging in the mid-south as we see 40 to 50 mile per hour gusts through Alabama up to Tennessee and Kentucky right before your line of storms late Tuesday evening. But these winds right here, these are going to be treacherous. Omaha, Nebraska, through a lot of Kansas, including Topeka and Wichita, back down to OKC. Wherever we're seeing snow in this pocket right here that I'm having in the circled region, 40, 50 mile per hour wind gusts, that is going to cause blizzard conditions. And those wind gusts of 40 plus miles per hour only continue into the rest of the Midwest by Wednesday morning into Wednesday afternoon, as blizzard conditions will ramp up into those zones as they see snow as well. A big field from Kansas and Missouri over to North Carolina, Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, New Jersey, looking at 30 plus mile per hour wind gusts, many cases 40 plus mile per hour gusts Wednesday afternoon. And Wednesday evening, we could even see a few 50-plus mile-per-hour gusts around the New Jersey and Long Island shores, even into the Cape Cod and southern New England shores. We'll be watching that before we see another breezy day in the east on Thursday, and then the storm is really wrapping up with the final gasps of wind on Friday. With that being said, I do want to let you know this is probably going to be my final video format update, solely focusing really in detail on this winter storm. I've talked about it a lot in the last several videos now, so we're actually going to move beyond it in future updates, and we're actually going to talk a little bit about the next pattern here in this update, but I'll break this next setup down in more detail a little bit more in future content. Let's give you a general idea of what may happen here with blended guidance with a look ahead to the rest of the week into the upcoming weekend, though, and it indicates that we're probably going to remain active because the origin zone is going to be sending us a new storm. Yep, I've called it the origin zone since January, I believe now, and the West does not fail to send systems that cross a lot of the rest of the U.S., And boom, boom, bang, we're going to be watching some snow hitting parts of California into Nevada, into Idaho, as well as the rest of the Four Corners and Rockies as we get out of Wednesday night into our Thursday. Some of this heavy, leading to half-foot plus totals there into the high elevations. Eventually, we got low pressure likely to move on out into parts of the Central Plains, transferring over into the Midwest. Where some spots here from Nebraska over to Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, Wisconsin, points in between. Out of Thursday into Friday, this is only a few days away, folks. Looking at some new snow falling on top of areas that just saw gusty winds, snow, and blizzard conditions. We could even still have snow on the ground from that in some of these spots as we get towards the end of the week. From there, confidence really decreases in the overall winter weather pattern. It looks like whatever happens out of that brief system moving into the Central Plains will weaken down with possibly some showers or snow showers moving into points east out of Friday into Saturday. But then this blended guidance picks up on a new signal that could mean a nor'easter, a strong winter storm for parts of the East Coast, maybe even some heavy snow totals into the mid-Atlantic as we go out of Saturday into Sunday. But whoa, grab the stop sign, there's a catch. That's the only guidance that's showing a system that far north at that point in time for now. So we're going to leave it at that, and if you want more updates on whatever happens out of that and all the future weather patterns ahead, including temperatures, make sure you're hitting that subscribe button down below. I'll have plenty more updates as we go through the rest of the week as we move beyond this winter storm that I've talked about in this video and ahead. I'll see you in the next update. Leave any comments and questions you have down below.